Hello and welcome back to the Genesis Designs and Modelcraft Bench, and part one of the second full build video series on the channel. It's only the second one. That was a surprise to me when I thought about it, but I suppose Foxy Killer did take a lot longer than it should have. Anyway, this one is going to be the Armour Hobby P51B/C Mustang. I did do a quick snip review of this. I'll put the link to that in the description if you haven't already seen it. And first things first, I've made the box useful. I taped it up at the ends and I've cut a window in the top so that it's now a useful box for building with. Top tip. It's probably worth keeping a sturdy lid type or tray type box kicking about for this sort of thing, actually, to be fair. But here we go. I've made a little top opening box for the use of, and then I've also cut down the main sprue so it's easier to get it in and out, because a lot of the main parts obviously aren't on it anymore. So the intention with this build is I'll try and do a little bit more sort of live action building than the Foxy series had in it. But it won't be a complete full blow by blow account. I'll dip in and out in the more interesting places as I see it, and obviously I'm always open to feedback on that. If people want to see certain aspects of it more, or I'm not showing things you feel like you'd like to see, just do let me know. But anyway, I will commence work and dip in and out, and I'll see you soon. So, construction always begins with the cockpit, except when it doesn't. As method in my madness. So I want to do chipping on the pilot's seat. So the first thing I did actually was scan the instructions to see which parts might need painting in an aluminium or natural metal finish first before I started, because although it's no biggie to paint different things at different times, it's nice if you can group things together and get several things painted at once. It's a time saver, you know, a bit easier. So quick scan of the instructions, and I thought, okay, so I need this area here, that's going to need painting in aluminium, so I'll get that put together. And of course, actually, the wheel bay areas, some of that is natural metal as well. So the first thing I actually did was construct this little wing spar arrangement. You may recall this was trapped inside the wing when I did the quick snip. And what I did was I put it all together with a minimal amount of Tamiya Extra Thin, and then I popped it into the wing parts like so, and then taped the top one over. Got it all in position, and then held it together with tape and just made sure everything was sitting square inside there and there were no gaps or misalignments, and then left that sat to one side for all of that glue to harden off, so that I know now that this is straight and true and it fits the kit. So that was that. Then I built this radiator duct area. There's a photo etch grill on the front part of that radiator. The rear face is just plastic. Truthfully, that's absolutely fine, and really the etch would probably be better served on the aft face than the forward, because it's slightly more visible if you choose to model the radiator flap open. And here's where I came up against the first, shall we call it, an issue. It's a little harsh, but this piece also has a piece of photo etch on it, and this is the piece that forms the sort of bottom of the radiator bath, and this little extra duct here is probably an intercooler or something. So firstly, be aware that this piece of etch, it is slightly deeper than the plastic part it fixes to, but you want it to be flush on this bottom edge because that's where it abuts the fuselage. But secondly, this piece, this is the roof of the radiator duct. Whoops. And this section forms the bottom, obviously, and it glues together like so, except it can't, because notice these two large posts, they do look exceptionally deliberate, don't they? And I thought initially that they were, however, they do not feature in the instructions, and they are in fact, these are in fact the mother of all ejector pin mouldings actually. You'll note that the wing parts and in fact the fuselage parts feature numerous hilarious ejector pin tree circles. It's like monolithic monuments to the art of plastic moulding, little plastic hinges all over the inside of this kit. So these need to go. Please don't think I'm whinging here, I'm literally just pointing this out because they look so deliberate that any modeller could be forgiven for thinking that they were supposed to be there. And let's be honest, how many of us have gleefully trimmed off something that we thought shouldn't be there only to find out later that it was meant to be there and caused ourselves issues. So I'm simply pointing out that it's there, I'm not complaining. There we go, they're gone. It's as hard as that to remove them. In other news, I have trued up the mating faces of the fuselage. As I mentioned again in the quick snip, there's a little bit of unevenness around the moulding in this aft area here, and to clean that up efficiently I did actually remove the interlocking tabs, and to be honest I found that they made the fit slightly off kilter anyway, so I took them out and I've sanded those flush to get that joint working. And eagle-eyed will spot that I have in fact also glinty added the inside of the tail wheel area, which encapsulates the actual tail wheel doors as well, which is beautifully done for a 70-second kit. This is crazy detailed. And spoiler alert, I have already foiled the outside face of those doors because it's a bit easier to do in the hand than it will be later. More ejector pin using in the cockpit. I took one away, let me get my tweezers here, quite a large one, but it was a raised one, so it's simply a matter of trimming it off. There's another one there which I've just trimmed up and scraped out to make it a little better, but I'm not too worried, they're not going to be super visible, especially if I make sure I don't put any wash in there. Now that I can construct this duct, I will continue to do so. Let's just test fit that again. There we go, it now fits together as it should. So here I've got some silver on. I have used AK's Extreme Metal paint. I really like this stuff. Matte aluminium so called, but word of warning, it's not really what you might call matte. As it comes, the spinner here and the propeller, this is how it looks. It's actually quite, it's not shiny in the sense of being gloss, but it's quite a bright finish regardless. So, and I don't want that. Even all these areas that are even staying in the bare metal finish, I don't want them to be that bright. So what I did was immediately sprayed a coat of VMS satin over the top, and that does take a little while to dry, but it is now dry. And you can see there's a plethora of parts here, not just the ones I was talking about before, but much, not all granted, but much of the stuff that needs to be painted down in aluminium is now painted. I've done the inside of the tail wheel undercarriage doors and all these and other internal areas, this radiator ducting part, cockpit parts, and then internal parts for the wheel bay areas. Note that I've done this sort of underside here of the wing fairing. You do need to paint that. It's not a primary or major part of the internal view, but it is viewable, and you don't want to not paint it and then realise that you have to. So I now have to put some zinc chromate in some areas of this wheel bay. I saw this with some dismay on the instructions, I'm not going to lie, and I did a bit of research, and unfortunately it's reasonably certain that this is what needs to happen. It's arguable, I think, on an early aircraft like this that perhaps the whole lot should be painted with zinc chromate, but I'll go with it. So here's the effect I'm talking about on the wheel bay roof, which yeah, that's going to be fun, and I'm going to mask that in a second. But the reasoning behind that, from the research that I did, is that the wing skin material, which is what the top of this bait is duralumin or alclad, and it is a sort of an anodized or coated finish, so it's not pure bare aluminium, whereas the extrusions or structural elements pretty much are, and so would have been coated in something from manufacture. So it's not that they've had anything extra put on them after it's been put together, it's just that they already were painted. So how on earth shall we go about masking off those ribs, stringers even? Well, there's only one way. Tamiya tape offs. I mean, there's only one way. Of course there's more than one way. There's always more than one way, right? But since I don't have a masker cutter or the skill to use the machines to make the stuff, then I shall remain stuck with Tamiya tape. Bear with me while I find my steel rule. There he is. So I'm just going to cut some very, very, very slender strips of tape. They need to be slim enough to fit between these details. And it's really just as simple as that. So it's stuck down to the desk, which will also in practice de-tack it slightly as well. Cut a length, grab it with the tweezers of your choice. We all use different ones. And insinuate it into the position required. Now, with strips of tape as narrow as this, you will find, there we go, focus, that if you can't get it placed down in exactly where you want it, you can actually just move them around, because they're so slim that the adhesive on the tape is quite happy to let you move them. I'm going to cut a piece that's even slimmer, because as thin as that is, it's not thin enough to go between them. So let's try this. That's better. Just butting that up against that rib detail and then feeding it down onto the surface. There you go. I might be sometime. Here I am sometime later, and here is the result of all of that masking. Did share a post on Facebook, but that was before I painted the ribs, so I masked all of those span-wise stiffeners, painted them with the zinc chromate yellow, which I used Tamiya's XF4 for. Be a bit careful of using overly bright yellows for this, because it's not technically not that bright of a colour really. And then I masked it chord-wise to just retouch those structural elements back in. There is a very light coat of X22 on there just to seal that XF4 in, because Tamiya can be a little bit fragile. At the same time, I've also been through, done the internal area of the tail wheel bay in the same XF4, and I've got silver where it needs to be on the inside of the fuselage. And the spar arrangement here, obviously masked that, painted the spar itself with the yellow, but I've left the rest in silver to replicate either natural metal or a silver lacquered finish. So the next step is to apply some wash to this undercarriage area, just to pop the details out a bit, as I've started to do here. This piece is actually the cockpit floor, but on the bottom of it there's this detail of some of the pipe work which is heading back from the engine towards the radiator area. I've picked the two outboard pipes out with a mixture of stainless steel and aluminium, just to make a sort of a grey metallic colour, and then the smaller ones I've picked out using a sort of a brass with a bit of grey mixed into it. Just I don't know what colour these pipes are supposed to be, but on Spitfires and Hurricanes, other Merlin installations, a lot of these metal pipes are a sort of a brass colour, so that's why I've done that. And then I've used the excellent Tamiya Panelline Accent Color brackets black just to pick those out, and I have deliberately used black to pick them out quite aggressively because they're hidden away up in the top of the wheelbarrow and really not all that visible. So yes, there'll be some wash going into these areas next. Okay, I got the wash done, and for the wash I've used oil brusher, Starship Filth. It says Starship Filth amusingly on the label. Nice one, Mig. This is pretty much my go-to colour for washing, making washes, to be honest. It's a nice kind of brownish dark colour. Starship Base Sludge is the other version of this. It's a bit darker and is also a really good base for weathering washes. I have in this case mixed it with turpentine. You can use either terps or enamel thinners to make your washes. I don't think it really makes a huge difference what you use, but there's 2 layers on here, so rather than using, shall I call it, a thick mixture and doing one, I've made a fairly thin wash and I've put 2 separate layers on there. That's dulled everything down, blended everything together and left a sort of dirty edge around everything, which is exactly what I wanted. Likewise, the spa area, same treatment. And I've not buffed it off on here, it's kind of left on there to make a sort of dirty smudgy look, which potentially isn't overly visible. I don't know, hopefully it is. The aircraft I'm modelling was in service in China for a long time, so I think it's reasonable that it should be quite dirty. And with that done, I'm in a position where I can fix the wings together now. And if anyone's wondering why I'm doing it this way around, when the instructions obviously start with the cockpit and the fuselage construction, the reason is very simple actually. I like to use plastic model cement to glue wings together. That's because they're inherently somewhat flexible even when glued together, especially small scale ones like this. It's thin, and as you can see relatively flexible even when fixed. That being the case, super glue with or without talc is not really suitable, because any sort of flex and it'll debond. In tension super glue's quite rubbish honestly, so that's why I prefer to use plastic glue on wings and tails and things like that, anything like this. So I'm going to join that together now. Good old Tamiya Extra Thin, which is what I have in at the moment. Other glues are available, and simply load up the brush a little bit. Don't have too much on there because it'll go all over the place. Apply it to the seam, let it run in there by capillary, and then just give it a little bit of pressure to fix them together. If your joint that you're gluing is too tightly held together when you place the glue on there, there's a good chance actually that you won't get the glue won't really get inside the joint properly, so just be aware of that. You're better to have a tiny gap and then hold it together once the glue is applied, like so. Almost a minor disaster there. I've just quickly pulled the wing apart again before that glue got set up, because I had forgotten to add the machine guns. So you can see here I have in fact snipped the machine gun barrels off of the little pieces that they're attached to. Let me just grab the instructions and show you what I'm talking about. Part number B25 there. I've snipped off the barrel part because I want to replace the barrels with a little bit of nested Albion Alloys tube, but I have glued the back piece into the wing there just to give the new barrels something to butt into when I fit them. And I also have drilled out the holes from the inside here to fit stores later, which I don't think I'm going to fit stores, but I would like to fit the pylon. So now I'm going to glue the wing together. Well done, Genesis. But you know, this stuff happens. Too excited about filming things, that's the problem. There we go, now I'm fitting it together. There we are, all glued together, no fit issues whatsoever here. The joint will need cleaning up, of course, that's inevitable, and obviously the remaining areas of those sprue stubs that I left there on purpose will get cleaned up at the same time. This can now be set aside and left for a good few days to dry off whilst I'm working on the cockpit and the fuselage. Alright, starting to get close to putting these fuselage tiles together now, and it's been quite the journey. So this is the main cockpit area and floor, I suppose. Several layers of everything going on here. So I first painted it aluminium, and then I hairsprayed and chipped just in this central area here, this little piece of detail in here. Then cleaned everything back up around it, masked all of that off, sprayed it brown wood colour, which I actually used the Foxy Killer Desert Sand mix for, and then I used some dark brown enamel wash just to give a bit of a streaking effect to that, and then I used X22 clear to seal all of that in, and then I used hairspray and then black, and then I chipped it, and that's where that is now. And you can see also that sort of shininess to it where I've been rubbing at it with the brush to create the chipping. It's also sort of left that a little bit of shine there, which I like, because when you have a surface that's trafficked and used, it tends to get a bit of a shine on it. So yet to come here, I'll put some sort of dust and dirt effects in there. I've got some radio boxes in the back. I've got to be honest, the instructions here were not super clear, honestly. I don't know if that's correct for this aircraft or any other Mustang. The instructions simply say that there are multiple versions and layouts of radios you can use, and to check your references. So okay, I just put some on. I don't know if they're right. The seat framework, see here, that's also got chipping and whatnot, and mostly this is in its natural finishes, the ones I put on it. So this is a flat black. This is XF85 for this fuel tank. The radios are done with LP5 Tamiya lacquer paint, which is a semi-gloss, and the decals have gone straight on top of that. So talking of decals then, the decal sheet for this has got a multitude, a myriad some might say, of decals here. This is a full set here. I don't know why there are two sets on the sheet, but it's quite nice, because if you have an Edward don't do a 72nd Mustang, do they, you fool? But if you have an Airfix P51 kicking about in a stash, you bought one for a £5 from Aldi or something, you could just as easily use these spare ones on it. But yeah, 24 separate decals for the cockpit here, and then further separate decals for the radio boxes. Yeah, printed by Techmod. They're nice and thin, and what I've done when fitting them, I'll show you the ones in the fuselage side here. This is also tiny, it's absolutely crazy. I've used MIG, Amarov MIG decal solution. Now this is the fix, and I only used the fix. This is really pretty strong stuff. It quite easily melts the paint if you're not careful. But what it is amazing at is getting thin decals such as these to absolutely just melt into the surface of the model, and that is exactly what it's done for me here. And once the decals were on and dried, I've given them a very, very light coat of VMS satin, and that's just to blend everything down because they are quite bright. I'll show you the instrument panel. Pretty bright and stark and in your face. A little bit too bright for my liking. And I was considering trying to tone them down somehow. I may yet use a bit of smoke or something just to dull them down a little bit, but actually with the flat on they don't look too bad, so I'll probably leave them because I'm going canopy closed anyway, so all of this is probably moot. This is some sidewall detail. Big construction here. I've done the detail painting on there and fitted the decals, which were relatively numerous for such a small part, but that sits on the sidewall on this left hand fuselage half. So I still have to do a little bit of washing and dirtying of these cockpit parts, but for now the VMS needs to dry, and it although it is a pure water based clear, it does take a little while to thoroughly dry. I've just glued in, please focus camera, just glued in the radiator duct assembly, which fits absolutely beautifully. I took a lot of care to ensure that this back corner here was lined up flush, and indeed this corner here, and they are, and it fits incredibly well. Obviously I had already painted the internal areas of that ducting with the AK Extreme matte aluminium, and that's how that will stay. And just for interest's sake, when you nestle in this cockpit floor, it all slots into place and it just sits atop that ducting absolutely beautifully. I have to say that the level of included detail in this kit is extraordinary. You can see how small it is. This is all from the box. I've not added a single thing to this apart from paint and glue, and it is astonishing. I've built 32nd scale kits that were more basic than this several times actually, and yet it honestly isn't overly fiddly. Some of the parts are quite small, but they've not gone down what I suppose you might call the Edward route of including multiple tiny pieces to build up a small part. They haven't done that. They've included a lot of stuff already moulded in, and all of the parts include a lot of moulded in detail. It really is very impressive so far. I'm loving it. But yeah, I've got to leave these parts to dry, so I'll be back later when we fix the fuselage halves together. Let's have a little look at some photo etch then. This kit does include a small photo etched fret. It's not very big. It's just some seat straps and radiator bases really. However, small as it is, it's a very nice inclusion to say that it comes with the kit included in the price. So I thought I'd do a little demo on the way I handle etch, because I see quite a few people doing it and no one else really seems to do it the way I do. I'm sure some do, matters not, but I feel that the way I do it is quite simple, so I thought I'd show it to you. Basically what you need is a hard surface to cut on. I did at one point use an old bathroom tile, but I think truthfully that's a bit too hard because it dulls the blade very, very quickly and easily. So over time I have settled on this. This is a piece of almost 3mm thick plastic card. There's nothing special about it. It's literally just a chunk of card left over from a project that I did, but it's stiff and it's firm. It's ideal for use for photo etch. If you just try and cut it on the bench, you're going to bend it because the pressure of the blade will bend the parts. Here the parts are firmly supported, so it isn't an issue. Now there's a few ways to cut photo etch from a fret. You can cut it with snips. You can get specific photo etch snips for that, but generally there's not really enough room around the parts for that to be you know, your go-to way of doing things. So what I use is a scalpel and a number 15 blade. Now the reason I use the 15 blade is because of that curved end. I can stab myself. I can use this sort of almost focus. There we go. This surface here to do the cutting, and I'll show you how I mean. with this harness. So what you need to do, get your part where you can see what you're doing, and use your blade, come in at an angle and feel for the edge of the part. If you can't see it clearly, feel for it. You hear that click? So I know I'm at the edge, and I literally push down. Hopefully you heard that little click as it went through, and then I'll turn the part rather than myself so that I've got a good orientation for each one. Feel for that edge, push down. So there's no rocking, there's no cutting motion, I'm literally pressing it straight down using that curved front edge of the blade, like so. Doing it this way leaves almost no clean up for the majority of parts. I think if you're making some photo etch boxes or something where you have to fold the part up, then it can be useful to clean up any piece of stub that's left. You do tend to get a microscopic part, and for that I do just use a sanding board, support the part in some flat nose pliers and use a sanding board to take that edge off. So with these being harness straps, obviously you have to attach them to your seat, and I'll show you here. Here's a lap strap. It's huge, isn't it? And this really is the secret to etch, I think. I already painted it, as you can see, with the other one before I even took them off, but you can see here I've pre-shaped it. I've gone in there and I've used my tweezers and I've shaped the part so that it will literally just rest in position like that. And by doing that, I've taken all of the stress out of gluing that part in. If you try to glue it to the side of the seat and then fold it into place, it'll work, but it'll probably come unglued a couple of times before it works. And it's very frustrating and irritating and annoying and all the rest of it. If you pre-shape the part as I have there, it'll just drop into place, and then what you use to glue it becomes almost irrelevant. You can glue it with nearly anything when there's no stress on it, even something like a bit of gloss varnish or, you know, anything really. What I tend to use on a no stress part is this stuff. Amowamig Ultra Glue. This is a sort of thickened PVA style stuff. It's not pure PVA, it sticks things a lot better than that. But that's essentially what it is. It's a white glue, and the other option, obviously main option, is super glue, and that's the super glue that I use. There are other brands of this type of stuff out there. Gorilla Glue was, I think, one of the first ones onto the market for modelers, and I think AK, I'm quite sure AK do a competitive product to this. But this is very, very good, and it's quite a large jar. I think it was 40ml. It's going to last forever. I've had this a couple of 3 years already, and I've barely touched it. And it has a multitude of uses. Anything that you would normally use PVA for, you can use that, and it's, as I say, it's a bit stronger, and it tends to set a little faster as well. So that's what I use to glue it. Just a little dab on the edge of the seat there, and just drop my belt into place, and that'll be that. Alright, well, we are ready to put this thing together. The interior is done. Quite a lot of effort actually for such a small scale. A lot of parts, a lot of decals, but it's all gone together really, really beautifully well. As you can see here, it's quite I won't say a tight fit, but it all just slots in there just so. Be aware that you do need to fit the tail wheel before you join the fuselage halves. It's attached in 3 points, none of which will be accessible once the fuselage halves are closed. So don't forget to paint and do that up before fitting these together. The instrument panel and its coaming are also fitted everything into the right hand half. I don't think it makes any difference which fuselage half you choose to put everything in, but don't worry about the fact that there's some paint missing here. I damaged the paintwork, so I just smoothed it out again. I can touch that up once it's all together, no problem. I've yet to fit the gun sight and the head cushion, but those can both be fitted once the halves are together. Really quite an epic interior for such a small scale model, I think you'll agree. Okay, slight interval there because I realised whilst I was filming that I hadn't fitted the little inserts into the cowl, and I wanted to do that before I joined the fuselage halves together, just in case they didn't really fit, because whilst the halves are separate you can easily work from the inside to help align things. I needn't have worried, as you can see they've just dropped in absolutely beautifully. Unlike most kits, they sit on a sort of a tapered bed, and that allows them just to slot and a sort of self-centre and slot in there beautifully. Anyway, enough said. I'm going to join this together with super glue. As many of you are already aware, no doubt, I tend to use super glue as an adhesive and a filler quite regularly, and I keep getting questions. I mean, I think I have posted a technique video just purely about this, but I keep getting questions, and it's fine. I'll keep on showing it again. It's not an issue. So I'm going to just go through partially just gluing this together and show how I go about it. So tools of the trade as ever, Loctite 495, and what I've done here, I've just got a piece of plastic packaging. I tend to use bits of plastic, blister packs and things to mix my glue up, and then once they get suitably smeggy I just throw them away. So here we go, let's put a dash of super glue down there. Doesn't matter truthfully how much or how little you make, but bear in mind there is a working time. It's not super short, but also it's not super long, so don't try and mix too much and do too much at once because you'll inevitably fail. Talcum powder. This is just Imperial Leather talcum powder, nothing special about it. You can get sort of pure talc from chemical supply type places, but this is just ordinary bathroom talcum powder, which I bought 15 years ago probably for £1, £1 I have just added some. You can make this as thick or as runny as you want. This is a sort of a moderate viscosity here, and you can see that that's mixed in really easily. There's no lumps there, and there's not an excess of air bubbles either, and that is, to be honest, there you go, that's why I use Loctite 495, because it does mix really nicely every single time. I've tried using cheaper super glues and they tend to sort of not mix as well as this, so that's why I've stuck with this. Now I'm going to add this mixture to the joint line, and I'm only going to work on the nose at this point. As I said, if you try to do too much in one go and you don't work fast enough, there's going to be problems. So with a kit this small, it's not too difficult to do it in sections anyway. So added a bead of glue to that joint face. I'm aware that I've probably just worked out of shot, I'm sorry about that. I needed to see what I was doing, and we're just going to bring it together like any other kit. I have of course done plenty of test fitting as I've gone along, so I know that this will go together without issue, as it just has done. And I've just worked off camera again, sorry. There you go, that is together, and we have a little bit of glue squeezed out, which is fine, that's what I actually want. So at this point you can assess the seam. Here is where I've got the small holes where the sprue stubs were, where I snipped them off and it left a little hole because the sprue stub was so thick. So what I'm going to do before the glue is even set is actually just add, am I in shot? Kinda. Just add a little bit of this along the outside. I can see that there's a slight, almost looks like a crack, or it's not quite together, so I'm just adding a little extra along the outside of the part, like so. Before this goes off, I'll check the top and see, do I need any extra on the top, or just pop a little just on these areas where it hasn't squeezed out and where the sprue stubs were. I'm off shot again, so sorry. Quite heavily zoomed in, so it's difficult. Alright, so everything is adequately coated now with the super glue and talc mixture. At this point, here's my accelerator. This is Rocket Blaster from Deluxe Materials. Be careful with the accelerator. Make sure whenever you're trying a new accelerator, and to an extent even with a new kit, make sure that the accelerator doesn't attack the plastic, because some do. It won't be irretrievable if it does, but it will be damage that will then need to be fixed. This is the standard micro brush in a holder. It's only in a holder so it reaches the bottom of the jar. There's not much left in it. And as I've said before, Rocket Blaster isn't the cheapest by a long shot, but it doesn't attack plastic, or hasn't done up to now anyway. So there you go. You can see that the rear half of the kit is still very splayable, and that's really ideal, because obviously when I come to glue along this top edge here, I will literally just stick my finger in the bottom like so and hold it open, apply the glue into it and shut it up, and then if I just hold this together, you can see that does fit together very, very well. Likewise underneath. Okay, that short little waffle has allowed this super glue more than enough time to set up, so let's get it sanded off. This is a Pro Modeler or Flory Models sponge backed sander, so you've got normal grit on this side and a sponge on that side. This is, I guess, probably about a 360 grit-ish, so it's not super rough. And I'm just going to sand, try and put myself in shot. There we go. Now notice, because I'm using a sanding board, the only place this abrasive is actually touching the model is across that bead of super glue. I'm not doing any collateral damage at this stage. If you tried to use a pure sponge sander to do this, that would not be the case. That's got it sanded, so I now need to remove these sanding marks. Best way to do that is with a sanding sponge. This is a Models for Sale. This is the middle sander of the set of 3 that you can buy. Modelsforsale.com sponge sanders. You see how it conforms to the shape of the kit when you press. So effectively you're sanding that contour back into the kit rather than flattening it. Finally, with the blue, there you have it. Glued, filled, sanded in one operation in a matter of a couple of minutes. So the only last thing to do here is to reinstate that surface detail. Scribing tool. It's going to be pretty impossible for me to be able to see what I'm doing and for you to see, but I'll try. Locate the scribing tool in the seam, in the panel line that I want to just put back across that join. And ever so gently just poke it back in. And once you've got your panel line scribed back in, a bit of Tamiya extra thin, not too much. Just paint that across the panel line you just scribed, and what it will do is just gently melt away any sort of slight imperfections and make it look, in the camera, there you go, and make it look like it was there all along. And there you go, that's it done. That's why I use super glue and talc as a filler. I don't always use the talc mixture to glue models together, but you can use it and it does work very well. I usually just use neat super glue, but I know a lot of people are quite afraid of that. And there you go, that's together. And with the fuselage together, that actually concludes the basic, well, all of the construction of this, to be fair. All of the other parts are in one piece essentially. So the wing then, and its exceptional wheel bay. This was, I filled the seam along the front edge. I literally just put a little bit of super glue and talc along there, sanded it back as shown. I also used a bit of the same across the front of the gun ports, and the camera, there you go, and then just a little, and then just drilled through, and that got rid of the sort of tendency for the seam line to create a little, to mar that circle. It makes them perfectly circular. I did that on both of those. No other attention required, and in fact it was minimal anyway. So that's the wing. Fuselage you've just seen, that's now done. All of the seams completely sorted. There were no gaps in truth, but even when there are no gaps in a part, you do still need to deal with the seam, and we did have those scars in the surface from the huge sprue stubs, if you recall. Here you can see the underside of the cockpit floor and the detail that that has on it. And if I just pop the wing into position, there we go, and that shows you how the completed wheel well looks, and I think it's exceptional. Honestly, I think you have to agree that that is truly excellent. I think anybody would be happy with that in 48th or even 32nd, never mind if in 72nd. It really is absolutely brilliant. Fit of this wing beyond reproach also, as you can see, with no glue. It does require a little pressure to hold that front part into position, but when it is in position, and I can't do it and show you, but when it is in position, the fit is very, very good. And that's handy because I intend to paint and finish this separately to this. Tail pieces I have already started to finish. As you can see, I have been busy with the foil. I will be foiling the fuselage and tail areas, and there's that in situ, that just pops on. There is a slight seam to deal with around the front of the fillet area, and that will be dealt with in due course, and then the fin pops on top. Again, it does leave a bit of joint area, and I will fiddle with that and make sure I'm happy with it, but essentially there isn't really any big effort going to go into this. So that essentially covers the construction of this thing. No major issues. The biggest flaws which required any effort with filling were in fact where those sprue stubs were, the little holes that they left. The rest of it fits together pretty much immaculately, shouldn't offer any real issues to any reasonably experienced modeller. There's nothing that I haven't covered in those videos toward construction. It's all really, really good. I will apologise again for the ambient background sounds as and where they've intruded, and if indeed they have. There is building work going on in the street, and honestly if I waited for it to be perfectly quiet every time I tried to do some filming, I just wouldn't get any done. So I'm sorry about that, but it can't be helped. Anyway, in part 2 I will look at foiling and painting this wing and the fuselage. So until then, look after yourselves, look after each other. Genesis out.